What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been following along, this is our third Gen Camaro that we picked up just a little while back. Now, before we picked this car up, someone had already started to swap a big block in, but there was a whole bunch of work left to do before this thing was even close to being ready to fire up. So when we got the car home, I decided to pull that big block out and go through it just to be safe, and I'm really glad that we did because we found some pretty big issues inside that engine. So while we're waiting on parts to come back from the machine shop and some new parts that I have on order, we're going to start tackling some other issues that we have found with our Camaro. So number one, we have found a little bit of rust. Now before we pick the car up, I did give it a quick look over, and for the most part this car is pretty solid, especially for being a T-top car, but I knew there was going to be a few soft spots and a little bit of rust on the floor pans. So that's exactly what we're going to be tackling today. But before we can do that, we need to get everything that's in the car pulled out. There is a whole pile of parts in there from the previous owner. I believe it's all the interior pieces and who knows what else. So first thing we're going to do is get all of that stuff pulled out, put into a pile, and see exactly what we have and see if we find any goodies. So let's get through the intro and jump right into today's video. Now that we've gotten through the intro, let's open up the door and see what we're working with. So as you guys can see, as soon as we open up the door, we notice that there is a door bar for a roll cage. Now it is MIG welded, sadly, and some of the welds are looking a little bit on the sketchy side. Now I need to do a little bit more research and digging around and looking at the points on this cage to see if it's worth trying to save it, or if we're better off just trying to cut this thing out. Now the other thing you guys are going to notice is there's not a whole lot of interior actually mounted in the car, but we do have a whole bunch of pieces that came with it. So I'm hoping that we have enough to put back what we want in here. Now I don't want this thing to be full interior, but I would like to be able to salvage this center console and maybe a couple other panels. Now if we look at the door panels here, it does look like this is a power window door on both sides. So we are going to have to wire that up or switch it over to crank. But since we have the console, there are a couple switches there. So I'm not exactly sure of all the little parts and pieces that we have and which ones are missing. So we're going to pull all this stuff out, lay it on the floor, see what's salvageable, and then go from there. Alright guys, so I'm not gonna lie to you, I just peeked underneath these door cards and there's something under there that's actually super cool. So let's go ahead, pull it out, and see what we've got. Oh, that says Holley. That's a Holley fuel pump mount kit. No way, I didn't notice that, but we'll set that to the side. Get these pulled out real quick. It's a shifter boot, guys. We needed a shifter boot. No, I'm just kidding. Let's go ahead and pull this door panel up. And there it is, guys. Two things, actually. I didn't even notice that because I was so busy looking at the first. I don't know if you guys can see what's in that box right there. Some good stuff. We actually need one of those. And then it looks like we also have an old school winter shifter. That's kind of cool. We'll have to take a peek at that too. It's already got like a old school B&M in here. Not sure how well it works or anything, but we'll have to see what that shifter is. And of course, we got to open up that box and check it out. I got to grab this first. Oh. Oof. Hopefully my excitement doesn't go to misery, but let's see. Mice have definitely been in here. Let's hope for the best. Have to clean this guy all up. 9,000 RPM someone was running this thing to. It's got a tack output. If you guys couldn't tell, This is an old school MSD 7AL-2 box. That's super cool. I've been looking for a 6AL box, but this 7 might just work out for us. Alright guys, so as you've seen, we got everything pulled out of the Camaro here, and we found some pretty cool stuff like that MSD 7AL-2 box, but we also found some stuff that's not so cool. So that's what we're going to start working on now. If we take a look inside the car here, you guys can see we got everything pulled out of here, but we did find a few little rust spots. So it looks like someone started cutting this brace out to mount their own seat, which in my opinion is not the way to do it. You don't want to bolt your seat to the sheet metal. You want to bolt your brace to the supports. So we're definitely going to have to fix that, cut that out, especially with this being a T-top car. We want as much support as we can get. Now, along with that, we did find a bunch of little rust holes, so not that big a deal. We would have had to cut this out anyways. So the game plan is to mark out a section. We'll cut it out. I got some sheet metal. We'll put a piece down, and then you can buy these, but we're going to try to make our own out of some of the sheet metal we have. We'll get one bent up and welded in there. Now, for the rest of the car, it looks decently solid. There is another rust hole over here, and then there's another one in the back, but as far as the rear seat pans go, not too bad. And then someone did already do a patch up here, which is pretty ugly, but we're gonna worry about that later. For now, I want to get this brace made and get this section fixed. Now, if we come to the back of the car, you guys can see there is another spot back here that has a little bit of rust that needs to be fixed. As you can see, there's a decent little hole right up here. Not sure how well you guys can see with the lighting, but there is some rust issues up here, and then there's a much bigger hole down in there. But those ones shouldn't be too bad. With some sheet metal, we can bend something up to fit in there nice and get it all welded up. But for now, we're going to be worried about getting that passenger compartment done and getting that brace made. So the first thing that we're going to do is take our shop vac, get all this crap vacuumed up out of here, the mice crap and stuff like that, get it cleaned up a little bit. Then we'll come in here with a torch or some form of heat and try to heat up some of this old tar paper, the insulation stuff they have down, scrape that out of there. Then we can start marking out and making our cut so that we can replace it with a new section. So we are finally ready to grab a grinder and get to cutting. Now, before we get started, I do just want to say I have never done any type of rust repair like this before. The only patch I've ever made was on the trailer project that we built here on the channel quite a while back. Cut a rust section out. It was on a nice flat fender. Cut it out, welded it in, bonded it, painted it, and it came out really good. You honestly can't even tell that it's there to this day. But this floor is completely different than that nice, easy spot. So as you guys can see down in here, there's these little divots along the floor. There's 3 of them here. And my first thought was to just cut out a section, big square, slap a piece in there and weld it in. But the more I'm looking at it, I don't like these little divots. I'd have to either hammer them flat on the car side or try to recreate them on the sheet metal. And I don't really have the metalworking tools here to do that. So the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking we just take this brace out so we have a stencil to make our whole new section, and then go in here, come up to where there's no more rust, cut it this way, and then right along the raised edges here, all the way down to about here. Then weld in that new section, grind it down so that when we go to put our new brace in, it can sit nice and flat. And then obviously have to do the same thing over here. Now I'm sure there's probably a better way to go about doing this, but like I said, I'm learning as I go here, and that's just the best idea that I could come up with. So make sure to let me know down in the comments how you guys would do it and what your recommendations are, because I'm sure there's going to be some other rust repair panels on this car that we're going to have to tackle, and I'd love to learn that stuff for the next piece that we do. So that's the game plan for now. We'll go in here and start cutting this stuff out, start making some new pieces and get them welded in. But before we do that, I do want to go ahead and just cover up all the glass on this thing. The glass seems to be in pretty good shape, and I don't want to go destroying it. So we're going to grab some brown paper, get anything that we don't want welding and grinding sparks on covered up, and then we can get to work. But now that we got everything covered up, we're finally ready to start getting to work here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is work on getting this brace out. We've got a little spot weld tool. I'll show you guys here in a second, but we're going to use that, try to drill out the spot welds, pop this thing off and out of our way. then we can start cleaning everything up. And Dad had a good point. We're gonna try to get the paint and clean these things up before I make cuts so that it thins out the metal a little bit less around the edge. And then we'll go ahead, figure out exactly where we wanna cut these to replace them. There are a couple like very small pinholes like this one here. I might just try to like plug weld that so we don't have to cut it way back there, because if I can fill that one and it comes out decent, doesn't just blow the metal back, then I can come all the way up to here to replace our panel. So a couple little things that we're gonna try like that. And then once we get this all figured out, we can go ahead and start remaking our brace and get ready to get that in. So let's go ahead and get our tools out and get to work. We decided to pick up one of these little spot weld tools while we were at Harbor Freight. They were only like $5, so we grabbed a couple of them. So I've got one chucked up in the drill. It's supposed to center punch for itself, and we'll get in here and try to cut one of these spot welds out. We'll go ahead and try to hit our first one here.
Sounded like you went through it.
Sounded like it.
Yep. First start. Yep.
Oh, that one went right through the floor.
Did it?
Yep.
You're good. Got it. Doing arrows now.
Yep.
Now you either got one or two left. There you go. That's the one that was holding you. There you go.
That worked pretty good. Except for the one where I went through the floor.
That's alright.
So as you guys seen, that little spot weld tool actually worked out phenomenal. Definitely worth the $5. Glad I grabbed a couple of them. But I went ahead and marked it out. Not sure if you can see with Sharpie. I marked there. I marked right here, and right here. I think we're just going to replace this piece, and then on this one we're going to replace all the way up to here. This one here was 100% my fault. I didn't realize I drilled through the first piece already. That was the first one I did. Learning curve, but whatever. I drilled a hole in it, but it's gonna line up with our brace, so I'm gonna leave that. I'll tap it flat, and then when we make our brace, I'll just weld it from the bottom as like a plug weld. So not too worried about that. The metal around it is good, so we'll be good there. Back here, there's some of that like tar insulation type material, so I'm just gonna heat it up a little bit and see if I can't scrape it back some, just on this one, so that when I weld it doesn't get all weird and smoke nasty and stuff. So I'm going to try to scrape that back, and then we'll go through, clean up where I'm going to be cutting, and then get this cut out. Yeah, this stuff, this sucks. See if it'll even move if I try to heat it. Alright, so as you guys seen, that actually worked really well. Heating it up with the torch, it came right off. So now that we got that out of the way, I can make our lines exactly where we're going to be cutting, and then I'll come in with the grinder, clean them up like I said, then we can cut it out and start making our new pieces. We're going to start grinding all the paint and stuff like that off. I use these little stripper wheels. They go right on the little like roll lock adapter for the die grinder, and they do a really good job of taking paint and any other coating off without taking a lot of material off. So works really well at saving the metal underneath the material you're trying to remove. So first I'm going to use a little sanding disc, knock down where we use the spot weld cutter, and then we'll go through and take the paint and stuff off with this wheel. just going to clean up along our line with our little strip wheel. Now that we got it all cleaned up around where we're going to cut, I'm just going to take a Sharpie and a ruler and mark it out. I'm just using a ruler because it's not going to be perfect, but we'll trim it to fit perfectly once we get ready to weld it. So I'm just going to use this guy. Trying to go just beyond any noticeable rust here. So I'm going to go somewhere along there. All right, let's get to work with the die grinder and get to cutting. Here comes the moment of truth. We're gonna grab the grinder and start cutting these panels out. Now, the plan right now is to try to cut these out, cut a new piece out of our sheet that we have that fits in here pretty much perfect, that we can butt weld it up. So old panel flush with the new panel. But if we can't make that work, we could always go through and just overlap it a tiny bit, which would be a lot easier, quicker, and faster. But I'd like to try to practice getting it to fit pretty well flush. So we're going to give that a shot. Like I said, worst case scenario, I have plenty of metal to cut another piece out if we want to go slightly bigger. So let's get to cutting and see what we come up with. Cool. Let's clean up that edge a little bit, and then we can start making a new one. Let's go ahead, get a piece of cardboard, try to make one fit perfect, and then trace it out on some metal. Now that we've got our old rusty piece cut out, I'm going to go ahead and start making a template. I'm going to be using just some old cereal box. I think this one was Trix. And I'm just going to leave plenty of room around all the edges, and I'll show you guys why here in just a second. But I just got my razor knife here, and we're going to cut our box. And now we can take this piece over to the car. Should leave us plenty of extra room right around it. So we've got our thin piece of cardboard from the cereal box, and it's just slightly bigger than the hole that we're trying to patch here. And what we're gonna do is set it down over the hole. We're gonna try to keep it held in one place so it doesn't move on us. And then I've got this very small little hammer with a ball peen end on it. And we're gonna very lightly tap around the edge with it and try to find the edge all the way around this thing, just very lightly tapping it. We can flip it over. I'm going to try rubbing it, and we're just going to try to use this to transfer our template. Now, you don't want to hit it very hard at all. This floor is very thin, so I'm not going to hit it hard because we could very well bend it, and we're just going to work our way right around, just tapping it very gently, and then we can flip it over and see if we have a template. All right, let's flip this thing over and see what we've got. So I'm not sure how well you guys can see it, but there's actually a little bit of a line all the way around it where our hole is. So we should be good to be able to cut along this line, and it should get us relatively close. As you've seen over at the car with the hammer and our thin piece of cardboard here, we did get a pretty decent template started. Not sure if this camera is going to pick it up better than the other one, but if we take a light and lay it down next to it, you can kind of see our line from tapping it with the hammer. This side I already started to cut with a razor blade, but this is just how it came out of the car after we tapped it with the hammer. So now I'm just going to be taking a razor blade and very patiently efficiently cutting around our line, trying to follow it as closely as we can, because the more accurate we are here, the more accurate our template is going to be. So let's go ahead, finish cutting this thing out, and then we can try to transfer it to steel. Like I said, I'm going to leave it a little bit long down here just because I couldn't quite tell where my line was. But I'm going to bring this over to the car and see how it fits, and then we'll trim it up some more. And as you guys can see, it is very, very close. I need to do a little bit of minor shaving. This edge still needs to come down a little bit, it looks like. I can deal with a little bit of gap like that. That's nothing. But we've got this thing very, very close to dropping right in there. I'm going to say that is very, very close. I think we are ready to transfer this over to some metal. All right, guys, so as you can see, we've got a big sheet of 18 gauge steel here. I do have some other thicknesses over there, but we're going to be using 18 gauge for the flat floor piece that we're making. But we've got our template here, and I'm going to go ahead and just trace it out. I'm going to try to use the corner as best we can. Sadly, the template isn't perfectly straight, as you guys can see. It's got some waves in it, but it seems to fit the car really well, so I'm going to just try to follow exactly what we've got here. So I'm going to get to tracing this thing out, and then we can go ahead and get it cut. All right, let's see what we've got. Yeah, that worked. I'm just going to mark it with a Sharpie real quick, top and front, like we did before. And then we can go ahead and get to work on cutting this thing out. Now that we've got everything trimmed out, we're going to try using the air saw here to cut this out. So I'll grab the grinder if the air saw doesn't work, but first we're going to try cutting along that line with our air saw. Alright, so as you guys seen last night, we did go ahead and get our floor piece fit in there, and it fits pretty good. I have some magnets holding it up from the bottom. Now, I'm not sure what the ideal fitment is for a piece like this. I don't know if you want a gap all the way around or if you want it to fit tight. I have it fitting pretty decently snug. There's only a couple little gaps in some areas. This actually fills in when the panel's up and flush. But before we start welding that in, I do want to start working on this brace because that's the one I've been thinking about for a while now. Kind of worried about trying to make it, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. So as you guys can see, when they cut this out, for whatever reason, they didn't cut it straight here, and that side's a little bit straighter, but not perfect. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to cut a piece a little bit long, and then we can shave it down to fit. Now, I was going to stack it over this and then just weld on top and bottom, but I think I might try to make it fit down in there so that it's just butt welded seam to seam so that it sits nice and flush on the floor. So what I did was I just took the piece that we drilled out with the spot weld cutter that you guys seen, took a piece of the cardboard from our Trick cereal box, made a little template like that best we could, and then flattened it out and traced it on our piece of steel here. Now, I was going to use some thicker metal for that brace. As you guys can see, I've got two thicker pieces over there, one stacked in front of the other. But after looking at this and measuring it, it's actually exactly this thickness, which I believe is 18 gauge. So I figured we might as well just go ahead and make it out of that. It's going to be easier to work with. And I was going to go beefier to help add some strength, but adding that little section, I don't really think is going to do much, if anything, for the car. So we might as well just go ahead and put it back to how it was. So we've got that traced out here on our piece of sheet metal. I'm going to try using the jigsaw to get a nice clean cut out of this thing. Then we can decide how we're going to go about bending this thing. Not too bad. Couple tiny spots I waved. Over here is pretty straight though. So we'll give that a shot. Now we can clean it up a little bit just so we don't cut ourselves and then get to trying to bend this thing. So I didn't realize it at the time, but I was accidentally recording in time lapse. So right here I was just explaining how we used our cardboard template to get the overall size of the sheet that we needed to cut. And then I took a ruler and a machinist ruler and started measuring each leg of our bend. So if the first bend was 1 inch, I'd make a line at 1 inch, and then if the next leg was 2 inch, we'd make another line 2 inches from our first line. This way we had some reference lines when we start bending this sheet up. One trick I have learned while working with metal is you always want to measure from the same edge. So in our case, we're going to be measuring from this edge here and this edge here for everything that we possibly can, because it's going to give us an even measurement. Whereas if we measure from this side, then measure in from this side, this one might not be perfectly straight to this one, which we can see it's not. So it can throw your measurements off and give you non-straight lines. So for now, we're just going to do everything we can to measure off of this one side. So that's number one. Now I can measure the next leg. We'll make another mark and another mark and another mark. I'm just going to go through and jam that out real quick, and then we can start trying to bend this thing. So I've got the piece we cut out all marked up here, and we're finally getting ready to start bending this thing. So what I did was I just took a piece of cardboard, laid it out, and then started bending it how I need to bend this one so that I don't get all screwed up with directions when I start bending this one. And I just wrote it down with pencil here. So this one's an up, down, down, up. And up would be bending towards the line like this side, and then down would be bending away from it. Now the way I'm going to go about trying to do this is just using a piece of aluminum angle iron I have. I didn't have any sharp angled steel, so we're going to give this a shot. Hopefully it doesn't start to bend on us when we're trying to bend the steel, but it's only 18 gauge, so I'm hoping that this is going to work out just fine. So I've got our vise over here. I do have the brake, but I just don't think it's going to work with how many bends we need to do. So I'm just going to try to clamp it to this angle iron very tightly, start bending it over, and then we'll just work through the bends, see what happens. All right, I've got my vise grips and my piece of angle iron right at the bottom of our bend line. I'm going to throw this in the vise, tighten it down, and see if we can't get it bent up. Let's go ahead and see if we can't get this thing bent over. So the method that I found that worked the best here is when we would first start the bend, I would use a dead blow hammer and just slowly start to work this thing over. I didn't want to put a bend in it somewhere else. I wanted it to bend right at our angle iron. So that's mainly why I didn't try to just bend it by hand and force it. So we would work it with the dead blow hammer, just slowly working it back and forth, making sure nothing moves on us. Then once we got it a little bit closer to where we wanted it to be, I would come in with the body hammer and finish shape it right around the angle iron. The body hammer definitely takes a little bit more time to get the metal to bend where you want it, but it was much more precise, and we actually turned out with some really nice bends. So we've got a bunch more to do, so let's go through and just get this thing done. Alright, let's see what we've got. If we're even close to our line. It's actually not bad. I can live with that. It's just about on our line. It's not the most beautiful bend I've ever seen in my life, but I think it'll just work. So next thing we need to do is, I think this next one is a down, so I'm going to have to figure out how we can clamp it. Something like this. Without screwing it up in the vise, and we will bend it that way. So I've got it jigged up on our piece of angle iron again, but the problem that we're gonna have now is this leg that we made is gonna hit when I try to tighten the vise down. So I found this big piece of steel. I'm gonna try to use it as a spacer, something kind of like that, and then we'll tighten the vise down right here, and then we can start working on trying to bend this over. Not ideal, but it might just work. So let's go ahead, get it in the vise, and give it a try. I'm gonna say that one's good. We gotta bend this next line down as well, so I'll have to jig it up again and see what we can get to work. Sorry guys, I forgot to start recording on the normal speed one. I was just using the time-lapse one. But we've got it most of the way there. We're just finishing it up. As you guys can see, we are making some progress. Things not coming out too hateful, but I'm gonna go ahead and try to jig it up. We've got one more leg to make right here. Not sure how we're gonna get it jigged up in the vise. This one might be a little bit tricky, but we're gonna give it a shot and see what we can get. All right guys, we are finally on to our last leg here. I've got it jigged up on the table. I was trying to get it back in the vise, but with the other bends, there's just no way to do it without screwing up one of the other ones. So I've just got it vice gripped here best I can. Got our angle iron vice grip to it as well. And we're just gonna start on one corner and work our way that way on this one. On all the other ones, I started in the middle and worked out. But since we're working on the table and just how I had to set this thing up, I wanna try to get at least a corner over so that it bites on this angle iron so it doesn't try to slide down on me. So we'll try to do that and just work our way right across and see what we can do with this thing. All right, let's pop these vice grips off and see what it looks like. Not too bad. Very time consuming doing it the way I did it, but it doesn't look horrible. Our bends came out pretty decent. Is it gonna fit perfectly? That will be the question after, but for now, we can test it quick. Doesn't look like it's too far off. This is cut super crooked there, but it's not too bad. Might have to spread this out a little bit. Could probably do that just by tapping it over this one, because this one has like a slight angle to it, whereas it was going to be almost impossible for me to recreate that, so I just squared mine, and I figured either A, it's going to be close enough to weld, or B, when we get in there to go and do this, I can tap around this stuff and get it lined up perfectly. But for making that thing by hand, I'm actually really happy with how it came out, guys. Thing looks pretty good. Not too shabby. Now the question is, I don't know if I should paint it before we put this thing in, and I don't know if I should drill holes in it so that we can like spot weld it to the floor, or if I should just literally weld as much of it as I can. I'm basically going to stitch weld it. I'm not going to run an actual bead on this stuff, but just debating on how we want to go about doing it. But like I said, wasn't sure how it was going to come out. That was the first time I've ever tried it. Doesn't look too bad. So we'll go ahead, set this aside, and we can start working on the next patch for the floor. Now that we've got our brace all bent up and this patch is made, we're going to start working on this one over here. As you guys can see, I've got it rough marked out. We're just going to cut out where the rod is. I'm not going to go all the way down like I did with this one, because everything seems real solid here. So we're just going to cut out that little section of rust there and start making a patch for that. Alright, I'm just going to clean up the edge a little bit, and then we can make a template and start cutting that one out. Alright, let's cut it out. Alright guys, we've got our piece traced out onto our sheet metal. I'm going to use the jigsaw once again. We'll get this thing cut out and start fitting it in the floor. Alright guys, so as you've seen, we got our patch panels all cut out and they fit extremely well. We've got our floor brace all bent up and I'm actually really happy with how this little thing turned out. Wasn't as bad as I thought, it was just very time consuming. Sadly, I only had a few hours this week to work on this car and this week's video goes live in just a couple hours. So we're not going to get a chance to get this stuff all welded in, ground down and see how it fits. But we will get to that in the next video because we still have some other rust areas that we're going to need to address. Now, like I said, we are still waiting on some engine parts, but I'm kind of glad waiting on engine parts has forced us to focus on some of the other issues that if the engine was ready to fire up, I would probably be ignoring indefinitely. So it's kind of forced me to fix some of those things that I was putting off. So all in all, I'm really happy with how this thing is turning out. And I can't wait to get all the floor pans fixed up and any rust that we find on this thing dialed in. Because I would really like to hit the interior floor of this thing with some sort of paint or maybe a bed liner or something. I want something that's going to be plenty strong and stick well to if we don't put carpet in it, it's going to hold up and look decent. But also hold up under carpet if we decide to put some in there. So as always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and check us out on all of our other social media platforms. Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.